In September of 2010, my boyfriend Dave, his best friend Tony, and my best friend Liz and I were all coming back to our hometown for our final year of college after spending the summer in London. We had a fantastic time, staying in my uncle's apartment, partying and exploring such a big city. It was great. We'd stopped in a B&B that night about half of the way home and were planning to get home about 6 p.m. We all woke up early, about 4 or 5 maybe, ready to set off again, when we discovered that someone had obviously driven too close to our car and broke the right wing mirror off. Seeing as this was my dad's birthday present to me, and it had barely been 2 months, I was absolutely fuming. We asked the landlady where we could possibly find spares or something to use for the time being. She said that she'd driven past a makeshift scrapyard or something like that a while back. She wasn't sure if it was still there, but she drew us a rough map and we got back on the road. I wasn't very sure she was right about her directions, because the closer we got to the area she circled it in, the more desolate the surroundings were. The roads got more difficult and had gone from stone to dirt. Around us, there weren't any farms anymore, just long, weedy grass and patches of forest. We were about to head off because of the wild animals, and I just have to get over being a paranoid driver and deal without my wing mirror. When surely enough, my boyfriend pointed out in front to a handwritten sign directing us to 2 miles down the road to a cafe and car spares. We drove down into a little cove surrounded by forest, and we all get out, except for my friend Liz, who was asleep in the back seat. There was a tiny cream hut with cafe spray painted on the roof, a caravan, and a hill of metal and bits of cars. As to be expected with this type of area, we were the only visitors parked up in front. The sun was up, but no lights or people were around. I guess they were still sleeping. It was still about 6 anyway. We all walked up to the scrap pile, and I fumbled through, looking for a wing mirror or any sort of mirror that could do for the time being until I got it repaired. Tony picked up what could only be at least a decade-old mirror and suggested we take it and go. But me, being the stupid person that I am, insisted I have to give them some money for it. I can't just take it and go. I knocked on the door and waited. A big, hard-faced man answered the door, and at first he looked pissed and tired, then smiled to me, a two-tooth smile. He leered at me for a few seconds, then, seeing the boys approach, asked us what we wanted. Tony handed him the mirror and asked how much for it. He said nothing, just to get to know us, to which I thought fair enough. Then, 2 more men left the patio door on the other side. They turned and smiled, both skinheads with teeth like meth addicts, and came over. They stunk really bad. He gave them the mirror and told them to go attach it to our car. He then introduced himself as Ian. He sat us down on the patio chairs and offered us some sandwiches. I politely declined, but he insisted we must be hungry and told me to come in. That women are the best at making sandwiches, he implied. I declined again, finding him a little bit sexist at this point, and when he asked again, Dave more sternly reinforced that I said I don't want to come in. Ian muttered something, and then came and sat on the chairs with us. It became awkward very quickly as he started asking questions. It started off innocently, like asking how old we were, where we were from, etc., and then became a little more uncomfortable. He asked if I had a boyfriend, to which Dave answered. Then he started asking us both what we like to do to each other and how often we have intercourse and weird private stuff like that, to which we didn't answer. We sat in silence until we heard Liz scream. When we turned around, I saw one of the men, who was supposed to be fixing on the mirror, with a hand in the back window, grasping Liz's leg. The other was looking around nervously behind the car. We got up and immediately sprinted off the patio, Tony running after the guys, but they both headed into the forest. Liz was hysterical. She'd woken up to find herself on her own in the car and a man's hand running up her leg. I can't even imagine how terrifying that must have felt. I got into the back seat with her while Dave came around to the other side to get in and told us some nails were on the floor. We looked over there and there were about 12 of them arranged around the tire like the guy was ready to pop them. I couldn't really think why at the time, but now I wonder where they got all those car parts. We decided it was enough and we didn't want to spend any more time there, mirror or no mirror, and we were ready to go. When Tony was the last one to get in the car, he closed the back seat door as we looked back and saw Ian reemerge from the house with something long in his hands, running towards us. My vision adjusted when he got a bit closer, and then I realized that he was holding a rifle, a hunting rifle. At that point, I actually burst into tears and hit the engine, slamming on the accelerator as hard as possible. The car started to go, and we got up to about 90, forgetting the dirt roads and just driving over whatever until the scrapyard was out of sight. We didn't stop looking behind us until we were safely on the highway, getting home. To this day, whenever I go to London, I take a train instead. I'm still terrified from this experience. So this happened sometime around last year. School had just started, and my only child was in kindergarten. She had only been in school a few days. We live in a rural area, and we only have one car. So in the mornings, my daughter, her dad, and I get up to take her dad to work. Because we live in a rural, dead-end dirt road, we have to drive about a half a mile down to the main road where her bus picks her up. Everything was fine that morning. I got her on the bus and headed home. I had the day off work. I only work part-time, so days off in the middle of the week was pretty normal for me. Anyway, I was doing some house cleaning and putting away some old laundry. I went into my daughter's room and started hanging up clothes in her closet, and I had the TV on in the living room, watching it from her room. Then, I hear what sounds like a soft, muffled cough. I freeze. I have no idea what the hell that was. I have no idea what to do. I'm just standing there, almost paralyzed. My mind is racing. Maybe the cat is outside her window, hacking up a hairball. Was I going crazy? Maybe it was the TV. It must have been the TV, right? Yeah, it's probably nothing. At this point, I'm still standing in her room, holding a shirt and a hanger, not moving a muscle. I really have no idea what to do. I then think I should head next door and have my father-in-law check it out. I say out loud, screw it. Luckily my in-laws live in the house right next door, only about a football field away. And my father-in-law is on disability, so he's almost always home. He's in his mid-60s and is on an oxygen tank most of the time, so I really don't know what I thought he could do to protect me. But I really was just so freaked out and didn't want to be alone. Plus he was a big hunter. Hunters always have guns. So I'm running faster than I've ever ran before across our yard. And I bust back into the back door, screaming his name. He comes walking out of the kitchen looking annoyed that I just scared the crap out of him. I'm on the verge of tears trying to tell him something that is going on at my house, but I'm talking so fast he can't figure out what I'm saying. So he tried to calm me down, and I tell him I think someone might be in the house. He asks if I'm sure, and I say yes. I'm begging him to come over and just check it out. He agrees. He grabs his gun, and we get into his truck and drive over to the house. I wait in the truck with the doors locked while he goes inside. I'm freaking out, looking all around me. He is in there what seemed like forever. He finally comes out and asked if I had left a pack of Newports in the room, right near her bed on the floor. Now I'm a smoker, but I smoke Camels. I have never bought Newports in my life. I tell him no, those aren't mine. His eyes get huge, and he gets a really panicky look on his face. He tells me to stay in the truck and call the cops. He hands me his phone, and I call 911. The lady says we have to wait for the state troopers because we don't live in town. I have already called my husband at work. He called his brother to come pick him up. He doesn't work too far from home, so it only takes him about 20 minutes for them to show up. My father-in-law, my husband, and his brother are now walking all around the woods that surrounded the house. Nothing. There isn't anyone besides us. After a while, the state trooper shows up and takes a look around. He finds nothing. He takes the pack of cigarettes, I guess as evidence, and takes my statement along with my father-in-law's statement. He tells us there isn't really anything he can do. I can't tell him what the guy or girl looks like because I didn't see anyone. There's nothing, just a sound I heard and some smokes on the floor. Nothing is missing from the house. There isn't anyone there now, and it doesn't look like forced entry. Of course there isn't going to be forced entry. We're in the middle of nowhere. I usually don't lock my door when I leave to go somewhere. Why the hell would I lock my door when I leave to go somewhere? I feel like such an idiot, but nobody locks their doors around here. I don't even have a key for the door on my key ring. We just keep it on top of the outside fridge, just in case. After the trooper leaves, my father-in-law gives my husband the gun. My husband and brother-in-law change all the locks on the doors that day, and now we keep a key on our key rings and keep the doors locked at all times. We didn't take our daughter out of school that day. She was only 5, and we thought it would just stress her out. We did let the school know to be on the lookout for some weird activity, and we had talked to our daughter about stranger danger and what to do if she sees someone in the house she doesn't know. I did have her sleep in our bed for a few weeks, but she seemed like she wanted to go back to her own room because she's not a baby anymore. That was it. Life moved on, and nothing has happened since. We never heard from the trooper or anything like that. We never had any other incidents like that either. I have no idea what they were planning on doing. I don't know if they were after me or my daughter, or if they just wanted to rob us. I really don't think I'll ever know. I still get paranoid from time to time, and I hate to be alone in the house. My husband got me a dog to keep me company and protect us. I just want to say this. Please lock your doors, no matter how safe you think your neighborhood may be. You never know who might just be passing through. To set the tone, I always hated the town that I lived in. I moved there alone when I was 18 for college and quickly regretted it. It was a decent-sized town, but full of not decent people. Nearly every gas station was robbed frequently. There were shootings in broad daylight, robberies, you name it. Well, for the first 3 years I lived with roommates on a side of town that wasn't too awful, but it was sketchy. So when I was making decent enough money, I moved out on my own. The house was tiny, maybe like 500 square feet, if that. Super old and poorly built. It was just me living there, so I didn't mind how small it was. But what originally sold me was that it was in the middle of nowhere. It was surrounded by a bunch of fields and some wooded areas with only a few houses nearby. Considering I hated being in town due to the continuous paranoia of getting mugged or shot, I loved the idea of living out here. So at the beginning of July, I moved in. Everything seemed super swell, minus not being able to get good internet. A month goes by, and everything is still going good. And I decided to get a dog to keep me company. He also loved the place, and spent long amounts of time lounging around the yard and trying to convince the nearest neighbor to walk over and pet him. Roughly about 2 months into living there, I started to notice things were out of place. An old roommate of mine was using my spare room as storage space until he got moved himself. So he had a key, but was never there. He just kind of popped in every once in a while to grab something and usually let me know beforehand. But I'd come home to my kitchen chair being pulled away from my table or a bowl in the sink, things like that. There were such small things I wrote it off as my roommate swinging by or just stuff I was forgetting. But then, my dog developed this crazy bad separation anxiety. Up until now, he didn't care when I left. He'd just lay on the couch and chew his toys. He never barked, never did anything weird. However, all of a sudden he began acting really awful every time I tried to leave. He'd literally cram his body through the door as I was closing it, screaming and barking, and wouldn't stop until I came back in the house. He didn't want me to leave him there alone, at all. I couldn't afford a kennel for him yet, so I decided one day that I'd put a movie in while I was out, thinking maybe the sound of people talking might keep him calmed down. I only had to finish one task up at work, and I knew I'd be home early, so I put in a copy of Hamlet. I know, boring, but I chose it because the copy that I have was 5 hours long. I knew it would be playing when I came back. Flash forward 3 hours, long before Hamlet should have been over, but when I walked in the door, not only was the movie not playing, but the TV and the Xbox were completely off. I immediately called my roommate and asked if he had been over, and he wasn't even in town. I explained the TV situation to him and shrugged it off as the TV powering off when it idles for a while. Even though this is true, there are several reasons I know this wasn't the case. One, it wasn't idling. A 5-hour movie was supposed to be playing. And two, even if it had shut off, my Xbox wouldn't have. I left it on by accident for weeks when I was gone out of town, and it was still on when I came home. But it was completely powered down this time. The weird thing is none of my stuff was missing and the door was locked when I entered. I eventually convinced myself that it was something weird with the Xbox or whatever and just shrugged it off again. That is, until my dog started acting even weirder. Remember earlier I mentioned he used to play with my neighbor? Well, all of a sudden, if she even walked by the house while I was out, he'd start yelping and running at me away from her. This was incredibly weird to me and made me incredibly cautious of her. I put some cheap alarms on my doors, the kind that go off when the door is opened, and slept with my pistol handy. The second night that the alarms were on my doors, I was woken up by one on the back door going off. I flew up out of bed with my pistol, trying to convince myself that I was about to shoot some intruder, but once I got to the door, it was shut and there wasn't anybody there. The alarm had been knocked all the way across the room. The door would have had to open for it to be chucked like that. It couldn't have fallen off and landed there. Something else weird, the door was locked, but not the way that I had locked it. I always locked the knob and the deadbolt, but upon checking my lock after this, only the knob was locked. The police wouldn't do much, as I had no witness, no lead, and they didn't have much to go on. Needless to say, I changed the locks. I didn't have any noticeable problems inside after that, but later found out that the close neighbor that my dog hated had previously lived in the house I was renting, and the locks had never been changed. I have no way to prove my theory, but it's pretty obvious that she had a key and was coming and going as she pleased. Why, though, I can't figure out. Nothing of mine ever went missing. The most unsettling part for me, though, is that she had tried to come in at night until the alarm scared her off. How many times has she been there in my house at night while I was asleep? And most importantly, why?